I think I'm going. Okay, so this is the second one of these I've tried. Just trying to learn how all the live streaming works so I can do the proper ones for the patron a little later this month and have them join and everything. Just doing some more, learning more about how OBS works. When we start getting people in the chat, it should be showing up over there. And if you do a super chat, it should pop up in the middle of the screen. And I believe I've got it set up. I'm using Streamlabs. If you look down below, there's a link where you can do a super chat through Streamlabs. And the way that works is it's the same thing. You put a certain amount of money to do the super chat to me. But when you do it on YouTube, YouTube I think takes like 50% or something like that. Streamlabs I think only takes a couple of percent, so it's a lot better. I'm assuming I'm live, and is there a way to tell for sure? I'm not certain, but we'll see if people come in. The Rebellion report looks like is in the chat. Is it going to show up over here? I don't know. It's supposed to, but we'll work that out. What I want to talk about today, though, is this errata security article from Robert Graham. I like Robert Graham. I like how he really just tells everything like it is. He's very directly spoken about this kind of thing. He's a cybersecurity expert. And I talked about this on the podcast, how Attorney General Barr was talking about once again about doing the encryption backdoors. And just a couple of days ago, I was reading that the Five Eyes nations were saying, yes, this is what we need to do. The Five Eyes are the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And so, yeah, there's all of this sort of, oh, we need to do this because, okay, I'm seeing Bryce Chapman in the chat as well, but it's not showing up over there. I am not at all sure why that would be, unless I just don't have it set up correctly on Streamlabs, but I don't know. We'll see if things start to show up. I had thought they were going to show up over there, but I'll keep an eye on the real chat room, but so yeah, I mean, this is an issue that most of you know is something that I've always thought about as being very important. You know, giving government backdoors. I mean, it sounds like, hey, we just want this for law enforcement purposes, and you know, we're not going to do anything bad with it. We promise. Well, okay. First of all, show us that you can do it without encryption, like they couldn't with the Boston Marathon bombers and all sorts of other examples there. But as Robert Graham points out, MoXL video is a bit ahead of the audio. Sorry, Mo, I don't think I have any control over that. That must be YouTube. I don't really know what would cause that. That would be something to troubleshoot after the stream is over, unfortunately. So hopefully, and you say video is a bit ahead. I'm assuming that means you see me speak before you hear me speak. So yeah, I'll have to. If anything, I would think it would be the other way around. I don't know why. Usually the video lags. But as long as, one of the things I was wondering is my camera actually going fine, or is it stopping like it was last time? So okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about the Robert Graham article, Why We Fight for Crypto. He starts off saying, this last week, Attorney General William Barr called for crypto backdoors. His speech is a fair summary of law enforcement's side of the argument. In this post, I'm going to address many of his arguments, and he starts off by summarizing them. Their claims of mounting crime are unsubstantiated. Their claims of mounting crime are unsubstantiated based on emotional anecdotes rather than statistics. And this is the kind of thing I've complained about quite a lot, using emotion and fear to try to sell you on stuff. We've seen a lot of this with these Democratic debates lately. They try to tug at your heartstrings and make like if you don't agree with them that you're, you know, a horrible, hateful person and a bigot and everything else. And the right does this too. You know, we have to do this, or else you don't want to be soft on crime, do you? You know, and we need to do these things to stop terrorists and to stop, you know, to stop child sex trafficking and stuff like that. There really isn't all that much of. I mean, there's some, and yet it needs to be stopped. But, you know, mostly what they're talking about is just, well, Robert Graham really gets into this I like some of the things he said about, so I'll mostly just let him go into it. Bryce Chapman in the chat, which is still not showing up over here. I'm going to have to look into that. But he says, government just wants to set up backdoors so they can later use legal loopholes to justify spying on us one step closer to Minority Report. Yeah, I think you've got it there, and I think as we go through this, you'll see that's the kind of thing Graham is talking about. He says his second bullet point, but we aren't talking about a trade-off with privacy, but other rights. In particular, it's every much as important to protect the rights of political dissidents to keep some communications private, encryption, as it is to allow them to make other communications public, free speech. In addition, there is no solution to their going dark problem that doesn't restrict the freedom to run arbitrary software of the user's choice on their own computers and phones. And the third is simply, I've said this quite a bit, we don't know how to make backdoors for law enforcement that doesn't enormously reduce security for users. Anything that lets the good guys in can let the bad guys in, and there just really isn't any way around that. So, his articles are kind of long. They're good, but they're long. I've linked to it down below, and so I invite you to read the whole thing, but I've just gone through and just getting some highlights here. He's talking about law-free zones. This was a phrase that Barr used, a law-free zone giving criminals the means to operate free of lawful scrutiny. He pretends that such zones never existed before. Of course they've existed before. Attorney-client privilege is one example, which is definitely abused to further crime. Barr's own boss has committed obstruction of justice, hiding behind the law-free zone of Article 2 of the Constitution. We are surrounded by legal loopholes that criminals exploit in order to commit crimes where the cost of closing those loopholes is greater than the benefit. Yeah, so I mean, operate free of lawful scrutiny. You know, you're talking with your lover in your bedroom. You're operating free of lawful scrutiny. I mean, that doesn't mean anything other than police aren't following us around 24/7 listening to everything we do, which is what we definitely don't want. I mean, we're talking, you know, that's the Orwellian scenario, 1984, Big Brother is watching. Which apparently is what they want. So a little further down he says, technology didn't create these zones. However, technological advances are allowing police to defeat them. Businesses have security cameras everywhere. Neighborhood associations are installing license plate readers. We're putting Echo, OK Google, Cortana, and Siri devices in our homes listening to us. Our phones and computers have mics and cameras. Our TVs increasingly have mics and cameras. In case you want to use them for video conferencing or give them voice commands. There's also something that's been in the news lately. Amazon has been selling a lot of Ring doorbells, and I haven't really looked into the whole story yet, but it's something how they're giving law enforcement the information on like hundreds and hundreds of these in case they need to look at them to see who's committing a crime. You know, if someone goes up and breaks into your home, then your doorbell will catch it and record the thief, and that's a good thing. But the question is, why would they need that? Because in such a case, you would willingly give them your doorbell. So why would they need to go in without your permission is the key there. But he says, every argument Barr makes about crypto backdoors applies to backdoor access to microphones. Every argument applies to forcing TVs to have a backdoor, allowing police armed with a warrant to turn on the camera in your living room. These are all law-free zones that can be fixed with backdoors. As long as the police get a warrant issued upon probable cause, every such invasion of privacy is justified in their logic. I think I see a little tiny... Yeah, I think this is not set up right. John Smith, your comment just showed up down there. If it's not approved, it is suspicious, subversive, and treasonous. First of all, I think this needs to be over here. Second, I don't know where it went. It went away. Where is it doing? It was there for a second. I saw it. How do I get it back? I don't know. I'll have to figure it out. Some weird setting somewhere. Maybe by default it only shows them for a couple of seconds or something. I'll have to check it out. I was kind of thinking it would stay there and kind of scroll up like I've seen happen on in other places before. But I forgot where I was there. I'm sorry. Yeah, there we go again. Shane's nose in real time. Inconsistent grammar. Sorry, I don't really care about the grammar. So I got a lot of quickies on the grammar stuff. Grammar, I'm only concerned about it as long as people can understand what you're saying. Yeah, they're only showing up for a few seconds and then going away. Anyway, every argument Barr makes about crypto backdoors applies to backdoor access to microphones. Every argument applies to forcing TVs to have a backdoor allowing police armed with a warrant to turn on the camera in your living room. Big brother. These are all law-free zones that can be fixed with backdoors as long as the police get a warrant issued upon probable cause. Every such invasion of privacy is justified in their logic. So that's what they want. They want Big Brother. They want 1984. They want... Oh, come on. Let's see. There we go. And, all right. So, he says, Barr's description of the problem is a pretense the technology created such zones when the reality is the technology created a way to invade such zones. He's not asking to restore a balance, but is instead asking for unbalanced universal surveillance. Every one of his arguments for crypto backdoors applies to these other backdoors as well. So like I was saying, you're talking to someone in your bedroom or your living room or something like that, and they can just turn on a microphone and listen to you. You turn on a camera and see what you're doing. Yeah, that won't be abused in any way, but the point is, it's not going dark, because there was a time when these things didn't exist at all. I mean, what would you do, before smart? You'd have to do like real police work. Oh, gee, sorry about that. Sorry, you actually have to do, like your job. So, he goes in kind of the pre-internet science fiction and phones and public utilities and things like that. I like how he uses some clips from 2001, like when Haywood Floyd makes the call back home. It's only a couple of minutes, but they charge him $1.70. So, thankfully we didn't go that way, but I mean, you could see it at the time. That was back when AT&T was a government-supported monopoly, and they could basically charge whatever they want, and you had to lump it. I think it was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In had a character called Ernestine. I think it was Lily Tomlin. And she was a telephone operator, and she was all stuck up and everything. And her thing was like, "Sir, we do not have to make you happy. We are the telephone company." So that's what that was all about. But going down a little further, Barr's speech talks about a Mexican drug cartel using WhatsApp's end-to-end encryption to defeat wiretaps when planning the murders of politicians. However, WhatsApp's end-to-end technology is based on Signal, which is free software controlled by nobody. If Barr succeeds in backdooring WhatsApp, then all that means is drug cartels will switch to Signal. No amount of regulating corporations will fix the problem. Signal's what's known as open source. Anybody can download it for free, either that specific version or their own version with any features removed. So even if they do try and stick a backdoor into Signal, you get the source code and you just take it out. I was talking about this, I remember if it was last week or the week before, when the people behind, what's that Twitter alternative called? Mastodon. When they were talking about they didn't want Gab to have a Mastodon server, when the idea was that anyone could just put up their own server. And so they were going to put something in the source code that would stop Gab from going around to all the other Mastodon servers. It's like, you do know you're open source, right? You do know people can just remove those lines. So, yeah. Yeah, that was idiotic. Says to regulate this, and this is the big point here, government will have to instead regulate individuals, not corporations or public utilities. They would have to ban unlicensed software that people create themselves. App stores, like that from Apple, would include government review of what's legal or not. Jailbreaking or installing software outside an app store would be illegal. So, yeah, and that's what it's all about. If you have you have a phone, you paid for the phone, you get to decide what software runs on it. You get to decide, what apps you put on it. And there's been a lot lately made out about the right to repair thing because Apple keeps putting the screws on that. And, people with iPhones, they want to jailbreak it and they want someone to be able to fix their iPhone for like $10 instead of going to the Apple store and paying hundreds or whatever. So, let's see. In other words, we aren't talking about a slight rebalancing by regulating Facebook. We are talking about an enormously unbalanced cyber dystopia taking away a fundamental right of the people to run software on their computers that they write themselves. So yeah, you write software or you get the code for the software and you modify it or whatever, just take it as it is. You compile it and you run it on your own computer. How are they going to stop that? There's no way they can stop that. They can just, all right. I don't know what's going on with this chat window. He also makes an argument. They always say the Third Amendment of the Constitution is the one that's never really had to be enforced. And this is the one that says the government can't quarter troops in your home. And it's true there's never been a Supreme Court case about this. But he does make an interesting point about it. I'm not quite sure if this would hold up in a court of law, but he says it's the Third Amendment that's important. That's one forbidding quartering troops in our homes. Barr demands that we, the consumers, can no longer choose what software we run on the device. We must instead quarter government software on our personal devices. So that's kind of a novel argument. I'm glad Barr brings up Mexican drug cartels using WhatsApp to evade wiretaps to murder and pillage. It sounds like a convincing argument for his side because it means only small regulation of Facebook to achieve the goal. But since the cartels would obviously switch to Signal in response, we're confronted with what crypto backdoors really mean: a massive overhaul of human rights. And this next one goes into something really dumb. He said that, I forget the exact quote, but it's like, oh, we're talking about people's emails, not nuclear launch codes. And when I covered this in the podcast, I was like, how dismissive is that? We're not just talking about our emails to friends and family. We're talking about things like our banking information. We're talking about the things that can identify us in the real world, allow people to impersonate us, get credit cards in our name, and run up these massive debts and everything like that. And this is serious. This is life-altering. People have actually committed suicide over this. So Graham says, after all, consumers are just protecting messages to friends, not nuclear launch codes. This is a fallacy well known to cryptographers, the belief in two tiers of encryption, a consumer level and military grade, that one is weaker than the other. This is a cliche people learn from watching too much TV. Such tiers don't exist. Yeah, this is always something that cyber people say, such as there's a product or something that says, yes, we have military grade encryption. Yeah, that's a meaningless buzzword. The military uses the same encryption as the rest of us. In fact, as he goes on to explain a little further down, the military encryption is actually a little worse. We don't want the military grade encryption. We want the good stuff. So he goes into a little bit of history that I'm not going to go into, but I remember when all this happened, the export restrictions on strong cryptography and things like that, and all the problems they caused and continue to cause for even just a couple of years ago, it was found that there was still some leftover code in web browsers from that day that allowed people to do a downgrade attack to the weaker encryption. But so he's talking about, let's do some math. A popular hobbyist computer right now is the $35 Raspberry Pi. That's the one you see that's I think a little bigger than a credit card, and it's kind of just the board, and you can stick a USB drive into it and boot it into Linux and do all sorts of stuff with it. It's kind of a hobbyist thing. was $35. Let's compare that to the power of a full $1,000 desktop computer and to the NSA buying 1 million desktop computers with $1 billion. What size keys can each crack? You'd think that $1 billion somehow grants near infinite powers versus the Raspberry Pi, but it doesn't. A factor of 10 million means adding 23 bits to the length of the key that can be cracked. So back then they were talking about 40-bit encryption. Add 23 bits to that. That's what, 63 bits, let's say 64. So, 64-bit encryption, yeah, that's kind of considered too weak these days. But if you think about it, if 64-bit encryption was what was considered uncrackable back then, what does that mean for today? Well, Moore's law says, the power doubles every year and a half to 2 years. Let's just say it's every year so we can pretend things are getting really, really powerful. And so it's been, 20 years? Well, guess what? If it's 20 years and it doubles every year, that's just another 20 bits. So now we're just up to 84 bits. We're not using 84-bit encryption. We're using 128 bits or 256 bits. We're using, well, man, we've got enough at this rate to keep us going for the next couple of centuries, unless quantum computing throws a monkey wrench in that. But that's a whole other thing. But man, this graph, I love seeing graphs like this about how hard it is to brute force different keys or different passwords or things like that. And it is amazing how quickly you go from just any computer being able to do it in seconds to can't do it at all no matter what. There's not that much room in between. Look at how fast those curves go up. So yeah, so there really isn't that much difference between the military-grade encryption used to secure our launch codes and just the computers you use on your phone to talk to people, or that you're using right now over HTTPS to connect to the website. I mean, that's really strong stuff there. And so Graham says, the TV cliche of showing a hacker working harder to bypass the encryptions, that's what they always show. Oh, it's encrypted. Let me type at the keyboard harder and faster, and then I get it. No, that's not how it works. Yeah, it's not reality. If the encryption works, it works against all adversaries. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work against any adversary. Crypto is either broken by your neighbor's teenager who bought a computer from their babysitting money, or is perfect defense against the NSA's billions. I like the way Bruce Schneier said it back in Applied Cryptography. Let's see, it goes... There's two kinds of cryptography. The kind that stops major governments from reading your data, and the kind that stops your kid sister. And that's really it. There's nothing in between. There's stuff like ROT13, which is a lot of fun. Go check it out. That might stop your 5-year-old kid sister who doesn't know about ROT13, but it won't stop anyone else. If you want to stop anyone else, don't do anything in between. Use the big 256-bit. Bryce Chapman in the chat says, was in the Army. Military grade anything is a joke. Just means they paid too much for crap that doesn't work. Well, Graham's about to explain that. He says military grade means worse encryption. Military equipment takes years negotiating purchase contracts and then must last in the field for decades. It's woefully out of date. In contrast, your iPhone contains the latest developments in crypto. The picture of your pet you just texted your friend uses crypto vastly better than what's protecting our launch codes. That military needs better crypto is a fallacy. And this is kind of funny. He says this picture is from a nuclear missile silo where they still use floppy disks. So that's funny, but I gotta say I actually kind of like that, because if they're using a computer that uses floppy disk, it doesn't know about the internet. If they're using like this, like a Commodore PET or something like that, I don't know what they're using. Yeah, I know a lot of nuclear reactors use PDP-11s. They don't know anything about the internet. They can't connect to it. So, a hacker can't hack something if they can't connect to it. So, get down to... So Barr repeats this fallacy in another way. talking about customized encryption used by large business enterprises to protect their operations. Again, that's not a thing. Customized encryption is always the worst encryption. The best encryption is the standard non-customized encryption that consumers use. When you customize it, you start making mistakes. The saying go around in the crypto world is never roll your own crypto. Use the other stuff that's out there. It's been tested. It's had all of the world's experts pounding on it for years and years. NIST, I think it does a really good thing, because now instead of just saying, oh, well, we'll just use whatever the government has developed, which hasn't worked out so well because they've had things like backdoors in them. NIST for SHA-3, and they're doing it again for some post-quantum protocols. They're basically running a contest to try independently derived ciphers to see what the next generation of them should be. So, Angry Froman says, I'd imagine getting some so old that the tech is incompatible is a form of encryption. Nothing can hack my piece of paper. That's absolutely right. You know, when if your grandma is writing down all of her passwords in a notebook, as long as she's keeping that notebook in a secure place, her passwords are as safe as they can possibly be. You know, so if you've cuneiform, that's even better. How many people can read cuneiform? Well, hackers would learn cuneiform if everyone started doing that. But yeah, I was saying this about voting systems too, because my prediction, this is going to be an issue in 2020. This is going to come up. The idea of all of these computerized voting systems, and because they're not very secure and they keep getting hacked. Well, my precinct has always used a piece of cardstock. It has the guy's name and an oval next to it, and you just fill in the oval. Yeah, try to hack that, Putin. Yeah, let's see you try. Yeah, not going to happen. So he goes on, cryptographers don't know how slightly weak crypto that's only 99% secure instead of 100% secure, because any small weakness inevitably gets hacked into an enormous gaping hole. We've seen that many times. There's been like this minor little flaw in something, you'd look at and you think, well, that wouldn't really matter. And then some clever hacker figures out how to exploit it, and then all of a sudden, they're in. Barr derides our concerns as being only theory, but it's theory backed up by a lot of experience. It's like asking your doctor to prove that losing weight and exercising will improve your health. Our experience from cryptography is that there is no such thing as a little bit weak. We know of no way to implement the government's backdoor in such a way that won't have grave impacts. I might not be able to immediately point out the holes in whatever scheme you have concocted, but that doesn't mean I believe your backdoor scheme doesn't have weaknesses. My decades of experience tells me it's only a matter of time before those weaknesses explode into gaping holes that hackers exploit. Yep, so remember that. It's either your kid sister or major governments. There's nothing in between. If they want us to weaken our crypto to the point where they can get in, well, then all our crypto is now in the kid sister variety. So that's true, John. You can't steal codes if you don't have them. That works. That's the idea behind Squirrel anyway. You can't steal my password if I don't log in with the password. But anyway, that's for later. I'll do a live stream on that at some point when it's a little more ready, in my opinion. It's going along great, but things aren't quite enough, polished enough, in my opinion, for the end user. But anyway, there's also this weird thing where, I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but the government's been talking a lot about Huawei and how maybe they should ban Huawei from selling devices in the U.S. because the Chinese government put in an encryption backdoor. Yeah, well, what are you going to say to them when you start putting in backdoors? You know, I mean, it won't be just the U.S. government we have to trust, or the Five Eyes we'll have to trust. It'll be every government. You know, it'll be China and Russia and North Korea and all those others, whoever. I mean, if one of them can do it, then they all can do it. So, Graham goes on. His argument is ultimately premised on the idea that citizens don't have a fundamental right to protect themselves, but that instead they should rely upon the government to protect them. They should not take the law into their own hands. I hate that phrase. Don't take the law into your own hands. You know, that's just a Because ethically, the law, the police, and the government, ethically, they don't have any more legitimacy to do anything that we can't. We're allowed to defend people from aggression, so is the government, but we can't take any of these extra legal activities, and neither should the government. So whatever, the government can only do the things that we're allowed to do under a consistent, universally applicable set of deontological ethics. So taking the law into your own hands just means, I was worried there for a second. I saw my 2 cents come up on the chat, but he came up there, yeah. But yeah, taking the law into your own hands just means using the power you've had all along, power that we've, supposedly delegated to the government and consented to and everything. So taking the law into your own hands shouldn't be a problem, because the law should only be able to do the things that you do. Yeah, my 2 cents. That's what I was just talking about with Huawei. The U.S. is working to outlaw any Chinese manufactured tech or software in government facilities. So Graham says that backdoors weaken their ability to secure themselves is therefore not a problem. This is bad. We should have the right to protect ourselves, and crypto backdoors hugely impacts that right. Yeah. John's having fun. Don't take first aid in your own hands. Don't take fire safety in your own hands. I have fire extinguishers so I can, put out a fire in my house if that happens. Oh no, that's the government's supposed to do that with a fire department. No one would say that. So why is it true with this thing called the law? Because people think laws are things that politicians scribble out on paper and then magic happens, and as opposed to the law being people working for their own mutual protection. So Bastiat again. Don't forget Bastiat. All right, so as far as mounting crime is concerned, and this is something the Republicans always do, and it hasn't been true in something like 20 years. It's like, Barr claims the costs aren't abstract but measured in real mounting victims. This is an excellent argument to pay attention to because the real numbers don't support him. The fact is that the number of crimes perpetrated is not going up. The rate of solving crimes and prosecuting perpetrators is not going down. If there were a wave of unsolved crime, then even I would admit we'd have to seriously start talking about this issue. I might not support backdoors because, as described above, they aren't technically feasible without violating human rights, but I'd be much more motivated to look for alternatives. But there is no wave of unsolved crime. All that's mounting is the number of locked phones in their evidence rooms. They're solving crimes because they have all the same old crime-fighting abilities available to them that don't require unlocking phones. Crime rates have actually been falling as strong crypto has increased. And so he has some graphs on that. So by Barr's own arguments, crypto backdoors aren't justified. So if the issue isn't crime, what is it? And here's where he really gets to the nub of the matter. My guess is that the answer is power. They have evidence rooms full of phones without the power to decrypt them, and that makes them unhappy. Boom, right in the bullseye. That's it. That's absolutely it. If there's anything they can't look in, control, tax, regulate, or do whatever, if there's anything they don't have any power of, they hate it. That is why Ross Ulbricht is in jail. It's not because he supposedly, hired a hitman or something like that. If they actually had evidence that he did, they'd have shown it all over the place. They'd have posted it everywhere. The news media would be covering it en masse. They don't. He wasn't even charged with it. There were some charges on that in Maryland, and they were dismissed without prejudice, which means they can never be refiled. The only reason Ross Ulbricht is in jail is because he made a website that government could not control. That's the only reason. So, before we accept the government's call for more dystopic police power, we should demand that they prove that encryption is actually leading to more crime. This should be based on statistics, not anecdotes like Mexican drug cartels or kidnapped girls, arguments designed to appeal to emotion, not logic. The argument of balance is often described by right to privacy, balanced with right to safety and security. I don't think this is correct. I don't think people care that much about privacy. After all, they readily give up privacy to Facebook, the Google, and other companies. Instead, the balance people care about is the abuse of power by the government. The balance is between security provided by the government versus security threats coming from the government. It's a balance of security versus security. And so, yeah, we've seen this before. If we give government too much power to try and keep us safe, then we won't be safe from the government. That's something you always have to remember. So China and Russia show us the answer to this question. Both have cracked down on encrypted communications. China mandates devices have a backdoor whereby the government can access anything on a phone, encrypted or not. Russia has cracked down on Telegram, an encrypted messaging app popular in Russia. Both cases have been motivated by their desire to crack down on dissidents. Thus, the debate isn't whether the U.S. government should have this power, but whether governments in general should have this power. I've said it earlier, it's not just about the U.S. government, it's about all governments. If it were only the U.S., we might trust them with backdoors. I wouldn't, because the U.S. is a free country and not a totalitarian state. Oh, give them time. But that's the same as saying we trust our current government to regulate speech because they'd never restrict political speech the way they do in China and Russia. We have a free society because government has these restrictions. If you remove restrictions because you trust government, that'll only lead to a government that abuses its power. It's obvious the U.S. government abuses any power we give it. Take civil asset forfeiture as an example. Sure, it seems reasonable that if convicted of a crime, you should have to forfeit the proceeds of the crime, but it's gotten out of control. If the police pull you over and see that you have $5,000, they can just seize it without convicting you of a crime, without even charging you of a crime. The Supreme Court allows it under weird legal fictions, pretending they aren't depriving you of property without due process of law. It's not you who is charged with a crime, but the object they are confiscating, which is why you see odd court cases like U.S. versus $124,700 in U.S. currency. I covered this on the podcast a while back. My personal favorite, I think it was United States versus one solid gold statue in the form of a rooster. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, DJ Arms, give him time. Yep. So all you have to do is give him time. So. Or take the border search exception. Obviously, if you're going to control the borders, it's reasonable to search people's belongings for smuggled goods. Searches that would be unreasonable when not done on the border. However, this power is now abused for things like searching your phone. This is unreasonable because there's nothing you'd smuggle on the phone when crossing the border that you couldn't more easily transfer over the internet. Yet the Supreme Court allows it under various legal fictions. It's not even really clear. We've covered cases about customs wanting to look into people's phones. It's not even clear that they're at all allowed to do that, or the Supreme Court, would agree that they could do it. But yeah, there's no reason for them to look at the phone. The U.S. Supreme Court versus the Starship Enterprise. Oh, I'll have to look that one up. So, yeah. Yeah, it's showing up on the screen. It's just really tiny and it's not staying around. I'll have to do that for the chat next time. We'll do a few more of these and just kind of tweak things as they go along. Or take the drug war in general. Take the drug war, please. Take it away. Get rid of it. Do away with it. Throw it out. Barr mentions drug traffickers numerous times to justify himself. Of course he does. Because that's what they do. It's always, drugs and sex trafficking and terrorism. But the war on drugs has been an enormous abuse by our government. Because of the drug war, our incarceration rate has exploded. I'm going to skip the numbers actually. But yeah, they're bad. We incarcerate more than anyone else on the planet for our population. And even places like China, or even back, when the Soviet Union was throwing everyone into gulags. It's amazing. Drug crimes aren't a reason to give government more power, but a reason to give them less. That's why our country is legalizing marijuana right now, because it's less harmful than alcohol or tobacco and therefore stupid to keep it illegal, while at the same time fostering abusive government power. Of course, I'd like to reiterate something I've said pretty much since this channel started. A drug being dangerous is actually a better reason to legalize it, because the last thing you want to do with a dangerous substance is take all of the decisions about manufacturing, processing, distribution, sale, and everything like that, and put it in the hands of criminals, that's all you do, when you, yeah, John, drugs aren't even fighting back. Yeah. But that's all you do when you make it illegal. You're just putting it in the hands of the criminal black market. So, and much applause on this next phrase. Legal doesn't mean right. Ain't that the truth? Our entire country is based upon legal actions by the English government that the colonists decided were nonetheless illegitimate. Just because the Supreme Court allows something as constitutional doesn't mean it's not one of those abuses and usurpations designed to reduce citizens under absolute despotism. The fact that the Supreme Court seems unable or unwilling to curb current abuses of our government, especially with regards to technological change, isn't an argument that crypto backdoors are justified, as Barr argues, but an argument why we need to vigorously oppose them. Bryce Chapman, highest incarceration rate, yeah, we still claim to be the land of the free, because we can't have people using free will to do what they want, right? No, then politicians might not have power over them. And then where would we be? So. The Ninth Amendment, always got to remember that one. The enumeration of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. But that's exactly what Barr did in his speech, talking about Supreme Court taking steps to ensure that advances in technology do not unduly tip the scales against public safety. The Supreme Court can do no such thing. We've seen this all the time. Oh, the right to an abortion, the right to privacy, the right to this, right to that. They're not in the Constitution. It's like, have you read the Ninth Amendment? The Constitution enumerates and limits government powers, not our rights. They listed a few of the rights because they really wanted to make sure they were protected, but they never claimed that that was all of them. John Smith, worse than China or worse than official Chinese numbers? Well, I don't know what other numbers there are. If there's been some kind of independent investigation that's counted up the incarcerated people in China and shown it to be a lot bigger, point it out to me and we'll see. But I mean, we incarcerate a lot of people here. So the right to encrypted communications or the right to run whatever software you want on your computer is not enumerated in the Constitution, and thus the Supreme Court can never consider them. It can never balance these rights against public safety, but they are important rights nonetheless. So yeah, that just means that the Supreme Court can't do anything about them, which hasn't really stopped them before. If you look on all the exceptions and everything they have, like to free speech and things like that. Crime rates aren't increasing. Clearance rates solving crimes aren't decreasing. Far from going dark, we live in a golden age of surveillance, where police are able to grab our GPS records, credit card receipts, phone metadata, and other records, often without a warrant. It's impractical to travel anonymously in the United States, as the government gets a copy of plane and train records and is increasingly blanketing the country with license plate readers to track our cars. If a rebalancing of the privacy versus security equation is needed, it's in favor of privacy. But we aren't talking about that balance. We are instead balancing security versus security. It has become obvious that privacy of security communications is a wholly separate concern from other privacy issues. Even though we rely upon government to provide for public safety, we are in danger from governments that abuse their power to repress citizens. It is every much as important for political dissidents that we protect private communications with encryption as we protect their right to public communications with free speech. Yeah, I haven't heard the latest on the Tommy Robinson thing, but I figured he'd get a kangaroo court. Greetings from Germany. Greetings, Jeff. Hope Angela Merkel has been treating you okay and hasn't been. I know she's talked about the going dark problem and wanting backdoors too, and who knows what the EU is doing about that. So, Graham finishes off. Cryptographers tell us convincingly that there's no such thing in cryptography as a difference between consumer-grade security and military-grade security. Remember, it's either one or the other. It's either major governments or your kid's sister can read it. Stop major governments, or, let the neighbor's kid, let a teenage hacker in the Philippines do it. There's no in between. There's not. Any backdoor insecurity for law enforcement compromises the ability of citizens to protect themselves. Similarly, it's not about regulating the products and services big corporations like AT&T or Facebook put in our hands. Instead, it's about regulating the software we ourselves choose to install on our devices. There is no solution to bar scenarios that doesn't involve outlawing such software, removing the right of citizens to install their own. Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen, if they say, hey, everyone needs to put in a backdoor, hey, Signal, you need to put in a backdoor to your encryption, Moxie Marlinspike is going to go, no, I'm not doing that. And what are they going to do? Or say, put in a backdoor and say, okay, and they commented, this is the encryption backdoor. So, you look at this comment, oh, that's the code I have to take out to compile my own version without it. Yeah, there's no stopping it. The genie's already out of the bottle. And it's just like the gun issue. If you outlaw guns, then only outlaws will have guns, because you're only going to stop the good guys, law-abiding citizens, from doing it. You're not going to stop the people intent on doing harm, because they're just going to switch to using Signal or something. Bryce, ever notice it's more and more guilty until proven innocent? Yep. That's exactly what it's being. You are guilty just by existing, just by living in the country. That's it. It's your fault. And so we need to be able to, if it's kind of like you're on parole, we need to monitor you. We need to put that thing around your ankle. We need to track your every movement with your phone's GPS or whatever. Yeah. There's no difference there. Couple of comments. Their comments are usually good. You don't get a whole lot of comments, which I think is the reason why he gets a kind of a better quality of people there. Yeah, fight for the Second Amendment because guns keep us more safe, but ban encryption because encryption keeps us unsafe. And then, this is what I said, ban Huawei because they may have backdoors. Then try to force U.S. tech companies to install backdoors. Encryption should fall under the Second Amendment as well. That's interesting. Just as with firearms, it can be used both offensively and defensively. It is a threat to governments and established interests. I mean, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. You're not going to stop it. It's already done. The genie is out of the bottle. So that's it. That's really all I had to say. This was a little longer than I anticipated, but hope you enjoyed it. Hope you had fun. As always, you have the links below. You can go and donate and support this channel. Hit like, subscribe, and the bell, all that good stuff. Really trying to figure out the best way to drive traffic to the channel again, since YouTube's been doing their screwiness. Also, really liking the way bittubers.com is shaping up. They just made a whole bunch of changes to it that make it so much more efficient. It's not as slow as it was, and it's really shaping up. So go and check that out. I'm Shane DK over there as well. So remember, there's no problem there with censorship or demonetization. Even the viewers are monetized. And I think that's it. You can support me at Patreon and Subscribestar. I don't know if there's a way to kind of include this here, but I am going to try to figure out how to do the monthly Patreon benefits with this. I've been looking at Jitsi Meet, which I like as an alternative for a couple of reasons. One, it's open source, and I always like to use open source where I can. And the other is that all you have to do is kind of like make up a link, just put in some random mess and put it in there and just give out the link and everyone can join. So that's good. Thank you, DJ Arms, for clicking on the bell. The bell is good. The bell is your friend. People have even noticed that the bell doesn't always work. I don't know what's up with that. And also check your subscriptions, because a lot of people are reporting they're being unsubscribed again, just willy-nilly. So anyway, please check all of that out. And I guess that's it. So as always, stay strong, and next quickie, do Dreadhead. I don't know what Dreadhead's that, so go on to the Discord or something like that and tell me about it. So self-hosting for the win. Yeah, there's problems with self-hosting though, but it's nice when you can do things like WebTorrent and IPFS and technologies like that. So yeah. Oh, Drumhead, like a Drumhead trial. Yeah, that's like a kangaroo court. Yeah. All right. All right, I'm going to sign off then. Thanks everyone for participating and chatting and everything else. Until next time, stay strong and be free.